The sun rose over the Arizona desert like a slow, pale fire. The light did not warm the land at first. It only showed more clearly how dry the world had become. Wind moved across the scrub and made a whispering sound in the brittle grass. A few thin clouds drifted like worn cloth in the big sky. Far off, low hills looked blue with distance. In this wide place, a young Apache woman lay still in the shadow of a mesquite tree. She woke to the smell of cold ashes. The fire that had kept her through the night was gone. The footprints around it were old now. They pointed in one direction and grew smaller as they went away. She lifted herself on one elbow and listened. The land answered with quiet. Her leg ached, deep and steady, like a heavy drum that never stopped. The hurt had started after a long day of walking. She had stumbled, then pushed on through a night that felt endless. The pain grew. Fever came. She remembered the faces of people who cared for her. She remembered the touch of a friend who had tried to cool her head with a wet cloth. She remembered her elder's eyes wet and wise when the path grew too hard. She remembered careful words, the kind that carry love even when they bring sorrow. There had been no anger. There had been no loud voices, only the weight of a choice no one wanted to make. The band had to move fast to find water and safety. She understood this with her mind, even while her heart protested like a bird trapped in a snare. Now morning had arrived, and it brought truth with it. She was alone. She took a slow breath and looked at the sky. Two dark shapes moved in wide circles high above her. They drifted on the air, calm and patient. She watched them without fear. They were part of this place as she was. She knew they followed signs of weakness and endings. She did not accept their plan for her. She was not done. She would move, even if she had to slide like a lizard along the sand. She would not rush. She would act with care, with the same patience that had helped her find roots when the ground was hard, or trace a creek by reading the green of distant cottonwoods. She sat up fully and tested her leg. The hurt flashed and then settled. She tied a strip of cloth tighter to keep the bones quiet and the joint steady. She had no extra water left in her skin pouch. She had a small packet of dried food. She had a short stick that could be a crutch. She had the memory of the land, and that was worth more than many tools. She studied the morning. The air moved from the west. The sun rose from behind her right shoulder. In the light, the soft draw of an arroyo showed itself not far away, a shallow path carved by stormwater that came only a few times each year. An arroyo could be a gift. Sometimes it carried a trickle under the surface, sometimes it offered shade and a few green plants that held moisture. She made her plan. She pressed her palm into the soil. It felt like baked clay. No give, no scent of damp. She closed her eyes and pictured a map in her head. The last place she had seen willow leaves. The last night she had heard frogs. The frogs had been a long time ago. Still, the arroyo was her best hope. She turned onto her side, lifted herself with the stick, and found a careful rhythm. Stand on the good leg, place the stick, swing the weak leg forward, rest, again and again. She moved like a slow clock, and the distance that looked small took a long time. The sun rose higher. Heat gathered in the stones. She met a patch of cholla and turned wide around it. She watched for snakes but saw none. The day was still new. When she reached the lip of the arroyo, she sat down hard and let herself breathe. In the shade of a cottonwood root, the air felt kinder on her skin. She scraped with her fingers in a place where the sand was darker. The sand became cool after a hand's depth. That was a good sign. She dug a little hollow and waited. A thin gleam appeared at the bottom, like a promise. She cupped a palm and tasted the water that gathered there. It was not much. It was enough to tell her she could live a little longer. She drank with respect, saving more for later. She wet a cloth and pressed it to her forehead. Relief spread through her like a slow tide. She dozed for a few moments. In sleep, she saw the faces of family. They were not angry. They were not cruel. They were tired and worried, and they loved her. When she opened her eyes, her heart felt steadier because she remembered that love. The land around her buzzed with tiny life. Ants in a line, a beetle that shone like a bead, a small lizard tasting the air. She watched them and let her thoughts settle. She knew fear would only waste her strength. She would make small, good choices. Small, good choices, one after another, could carry a person far. Elsewhere on the same morning, a man guided a mule along a faint trail. He had a gentle way with the animal and a quiet gait, as if he respected the silence of the desert. He was a ranch hand and a tracker by habit, though he liked the word walker better. He had moved supplies to a nearby homestead the day before and was now bringing the mule home with empty barrels that clacked softly in time with the mule's steps. He had learned to read the land from people who paid attention. He looked at the angle of dust on grass. He looked at the way birds lifted, settled, and lifted again. He looked for small changes that told a larger story. Near a bend in the dry wash, he saw a scrap of woven cloth caught on a thorn. It was the color of earth mixed with sky, a careful color made to blend in. He stopped and let the mule rest. The mule breathed glad thanks in a long exhale. The man took the cloth between his fingers and felt its weave. He looked up. 2 birds, spiraled high, then drifted apart, then came together again. He followed their slow dance with his eyes and thought about what it might mean. He did not rush toward any conclusion. He had seen the desert play tricks on people who hurried. He took a drink of water and shared some with the mule, then tied the scrap of cloth to the strap on his belt as a reminder to pay closer attention. The young woman in the arroyo had moved farther into the shade by then. She ate a few bites of her dry food and saved the rest. She straightened the splint. She watched the birds. She spoke softly to her own courage, the way a person speaks to a child who must walk on a narrow log across a creek. Step, breathe, and step again. The day warmed. The sky grew white near the sun. She knew she could not travel fast, so she chose a new plan. She would stay near the arroyo until evening, when the light grew softer. She would make a small signal for help that did not call the wrong attention. She chose 3 small stones and placed them in a triangle on the bank where they would be seen by someone who knew to look. She chose a stick and leaned it like a pointer toward the little hollow where water seeped up. A person following the arroyo would understand. And if no one came, she would still have water and a little shade. The man and the mule reached a stretch of the arroyo at noon. He let the mule drink a mouthful from his canteen, then capped it tight. He was careful not to leave the animal thirsty, but he did not waste. He gazed over the edge and saw a small triangle of stones. His face changed in a slight way, the kind that shows attention without fear. He climbed down the bank with slow steps so that the sand would not slide. He looked for tracks and found them, a light, uneven pattern, the guide marks of a stick. He followed these signs as a reader follows a line of text on a page. She heard him before she saw him. It was not a harsh sound, not a shout. It was the simple scuff of boot on sand, the steady huff of a mule who wanted shade too. She did not move at first. She kept her breathing even and let her hands rest where he could see them if he came closer. The man paused at the top of the small rise and called out with a gentle voice. He used only a few words and left space between them, as if words were stones he did not want to throw too fast. She did not answer with sound. She met his gaze. Her eyes were clear and careful. He held her gaze for a moment and then looked down to show respect. He took a canteen from his belt, set it on the sand within a few steps of her, and moved back. He took a piece of dried meat from his bag and placed it beside the canteen. His hands were open and easy. He stayed at a distance and waited. She slid forward and reached for the canteen. The metal was warm from the sun. She opened it and took a small drink, then another, the way a person does when they remember that water can make them sick if they take too much, too fast. She lifted the meat and tested it with her teeth. It tasted like the edge of smoke and salt. It gave her strength. Still, she watched him. He did not rush her. He sat near the mule and ran a gentle hand along the animal's neck. The mule leaned into the touch, grateful for shade. The desert made a low hum around them. Time passed in a calm way. At last he spoke again, even more slowly and simply. He said that he could help her move to a place where there was more water and a roof of sticks for shade. He said he would bring her there and leave if she wished. He did not ask for anything. He pointed to the mule, then to the small packs on its sides, and then opened his palms again to show he carried no harm. She listened. She looked up at the birds for a long breath, then back at him. The choice felt like a stone in her hand. It was heavy, but it was hers to hold. The mule stepped carefully, and the man walked beside it with a steady pace that matched the rhythm of her breathing. The land felt softer as evening touched it. The heat slipped away, and a mild wind moved through the creosote bushes, leaving a scent like clean rain that had not yet fallen. In this gentle light, the world seemed wider, as if the sky itself had made room for them. The woman sat in the sling with her hands resting lightly near the mule's neck. The man checked the knot from time to time, not out of worry but out of quiet care. He did not rush, and she did not press him to go faster. They both understood that steady steps are sometimes the shortest path. They came to a low rise where the ground had been shaped by weather and time into a natural shelter. A ring of rocks held old ashes, a sign that someone had once rested there and left the place clean. The man stopped and touched the stones, then looked at her as if asking permission in his own way. She dipped her chin in a small nod. He took the hint and began to work. He gathered fallen sticks without breaking living branches. He scraped a shallow pit and set a careful fire, coaxing it with patience so it would burn small and clear. He placed a pot over the coals and filled it with water from his canteen, adding a handful of dried beans and a pinch of salt he kept in a cloth. The scent rose, mild and comforting. The mule lowered its head and rested a hoof. The desert settled into evening like a family slipping into shared silence after a long day. When the beans softened, he lifted the pot and set it on a flat rock to cool. He offered her the first bowl and waited until she tasted it. She took small spoonfuls, slow and thoughtful. Warmth spread through her, not just in her body but in her spirit too. Food cooked by kind hands tastes different, she thought. He ate after her, not in a showy way, but as one who recognized that gratitude and manners could live even in hard places. The stars began to appear, one by one like tiny lamps lit by careful keepers of the sky. He looked up and spoke a few words about how he used the stars to keep his sense of direction on long nights. She listened and tilted her head slightly, as if to say she also had ways to read the night, and some of those ways were older than his. He understood and smiled in a brief, gentle way. The breeze carried a cool touch, so he took a second blanket from his pack and draped it over her shoulders, then stepped back, giving her space. She adjusted the blanket herself, appreciating that he let her decide how to arrange it. Trust grows in small acts like that. While the fire made a soft glow, she looked at her splint. The cloth had slipped a bit. He noticed without pointing it out. He boiled water, cleaned his hands, and fetched a flat stick that he had smoothed with a knife earlier. He held out the stick, and when she nodded, he helped retie the splint with even tension, checking her face for signs of discomfort. She held steady. He did not talk much. He let the care speak for him. When he finished, the splint felt more secure, the pain less wild, and the night more possible. In the quiet, a sound came from far away. It was the faint clip of hooves and the low murmur of men's voices. It was not a threatening sound, more like a reminder that the desert had many travelers. The man looked toward the sound, then toward her, and pressed a finger to his lips to say he would keep silence and calm. She met his eyes with the calm of her own. He banked the fire to a faint, steady glow that gave warmth without sending a high flame into the night. The voices drifted, then faded, and the stars took the stage again. When the night grew deeper, he spread a bedroll a respectful distance away and lay on his back with his hat tipped low. He did not sleep quickly. He listened to the mule's slow breathing, to the fire's whisper, and to the soft crack of settling stones. He also listened to the steady, quiet strength of the woman's presence. She had been left in a hard moment, but she had carried herself through the day with dignity, and that fact stood like a lantern in his mind. He let the thought warm him as sleep finally found him. Morning touched the rim of the world with pale gold. The woman woke to the soft rustle of the mule shaking dust from its coat. The man rose with the light and stirred the coals back to life, brewing a tin cup of coffee for himself. He did not offer it to her, knowing that taste is personal and that a warm cup of plain water might be more welcome. He warmed water and passed her the cup. She held it with both hands and sipped it like a blessing, After they ate, he rolled the blankets and checked the mule's hooves. He spoke gently to the animal and then asked in his slow, simple way if she would like to visit a place with clean water and a little shade made of branches. Not far now. He gestured with an open palm toward a line of dark stones that hinted at a spring somewhere behind them. She listened to the land too, and something in the air said yes. She nodded. They traveled in the sweet hour before the sun grew strong. The ground changed a little, lifting and falling like the breath of a sleeping giant. Birds flitted between low trees, and a hare darted across their path, leaving the small marks of quick feet in the dust. As they moved, they learned the shape of each other's quiet. He learned that she liked to scan the horizon at regular beats, not because of fear, but because she knew the land had stories to tell, and she did not want to miss the opening sentences. She learned that he would pause often to test the ground with his eyes, choosing paths that were soft on the mule and easy on her leg. Little by little, trust grew like a green shoot after a rare rain. Near midday, they reached the place he had spoken of. A spring came up from under dark stones at the base of a low hill. Cottonwood stood nearby with leaves that made a cool sound in the breeze, a sound like distant water even when there was no wind. He had made a simple shelter there in earlier seasons. 4 posts, a roof of willow branches, and a woven wall on one side to catch the afternoon sun. It was modest, but the shade it cast felt generous. He helped her down with the same calm care as before. When her feet touched the ground, she inhaled in a slow, deep way as if drawing strength from the very air. He filled a shallow basin and let the water sit until the dust settled. He washed her splint and the skin around it, then set the splint again with fresh cloth. He showed her where the spring ran under a flat stone, cool and quiet, and how he had placed a small channel of sticks so the water would collect in a pool before slipping away into the sand. She smiled in her eyes, the kind of smile that says a person recognizes good work done with respect. Days took on a rhythm there. In the mornings, he mended tools or checked the fences at his homestead a short ride away, then returned by midday with simple food, cornmeal, beans, sometimes a handful of dried fruit. She ground corn with a smooth stone, and the slow circle of the grinding felt like a song, steady, patient, promising. In the afternoons, she sat under the shelter's shade and retold the map of the land in her mind. He learned by listening, not by interrupting. She pointed with a glance more than with her hand. There, where the rock wears a stripe like a belt, water hides after a rare storm. There, where the yucca grows in a ring, the soil holds a story of wind. Their shared language grew from care and useful tasks. Words were few but clear. From time to time, riders passed at a distance. Sometimes they were curious. Sometimes they were simply busy going somewhere else. When anyone came close, he stood in an open way, neither hiding nor showing off. He spoke in a calm tone, mentioned his homestead, and asked about the weather. He did not mention her unless she wished it, and she almost never wished it. In this way, they kept their small place quiet, and the spring kept flowing and the cottonwood leaves kept whispering their kind sound. As her leg grew stronger, she began to move with more freedom. First, she practiced standing without the sling, then walking a few steps with the stick. Later, she walked from the shelter to the spring and back, slow and proud. He watched without hovering. When she stumbled, he turned his eyes toward the horizon, giving her room to steady herself without a cloud of worry around her. Respect, like shade, is a gift that lets a person breathe. One day, she asked to sit on a low rise where she could see far. He led her there and then left her to the view. From that place, the land opened like a book. In the distance, a thin line of smoke rose and fell. It was small, not a threat, a household fire or a traveler's cooking. She watched it with an expression that held both longing and calm. Home, like water, can be more than one place, she thought. A person can carry home in the way they move through the world, in the careful way they set stones in a triangle, in the way they remember names and keep promises. After some days, when the moon had grown from a silver thread to a half circle, she told him with a few simple words and a firm gaze that she would leave soon. She wanted to walk a path of her own choosing, to follow signs she trusted. He received her words with care. He did not ask to change her mind. He simply asked what would be most useful for her journey. She asked for a small knife and a striker for making fire. He nodded and set about making a leather sheath for the knife so it would not catch on her clothing. He polished the striker and tied it on a cord.